You must have cunningly stolen someone else's credit. I don't trust a dull man like you. You are stepping down from this project as well. Having someone like you represent our company is an embarrassment."
The president's daughter's words were utterly unreasonable, one-sided, and dripping with contempt and discrimination. Suddenly, something inside me exploded.
Embarrassment, I see. Well then, I'll step down as the project manager, and while I'm at it, I'll resign from this company too.
To my breaking point, the two villains just smirked with pleasure.
Don't leave any trace of a dull man like you in our company. You'd be a stain on our reputation. Clean up everything and get out quickly.
With these cruel, final words, she pushed me away. At that moment, I decided, what would really happen if I erased all traces of myself? I resolved then to make these corrupt villains realize the true impact. I'm Chris. This year, I turned 30, just another regular guy working a white-collar job. Today, I'd like to share how even a plain guy like me can change dramatically, just by adjusting his mindset. Born in the suburbs of New York, I wasn't particularly bright as a child and didn't have any special talents. From elementary school, I was what you'd call one of the crowd. I was the kind of kid who blended into the background in a class full of average students. My grades were always below average, and I wasn't athletic, making sports days a real pain. When I moved up to middle school, I joined the basketball team as a typical average kid because it was the most popular club. Since our school team was not strong, we often got thrashed in games, and I have no fond memories of any tournaments. By the 9th grade, my academic performance hadn't improved, and my grades continued to struggle. So, I ended up failing to get into my first-choice public high school. Reluctantly, I attended a private high school with lower standards. Since we weren't exactly wealthy, my mom often reminded me bitterly, "I'm paying a lot for you to attend this private school." I was quite traumatized by this experience of failing to get into my first-choice high school. After that, I grew up to be a cold and resigned teenager who was possessed by nihilism attitude and thinking that even if I tried my best, it would be useless anyway. In high school, I didn't study seriously. I just played games and hung out aimlessly with friends, wasting my high school years. As my high school days passed, the time to decide my future came. I gave up on the idea of going to college right from the start. Thinking I'd probably fail even at a low-ranked university, I decided to get a job right after high school. I applied to various companies, including civil service positions, but didn't do well. Somehow, I managed to land a job at a fairly large company called Ace Trading. At this company, except for the warehouse, logistics, and fieldwork, almost all of the desk-bound employees were college-educated. The few high school graduates there were much older, middle-aged men and women. I was assigned to the department in charge of managing the company's internal systems. And my direct boss there was Sam, the department head, who was practically royalty in the office. Sam was an elite with a degree from a prestigious university, from a wealthy family, and he was a tall, handsome man. However, Sam's character was terrible. Ever since I was new, Sam constantly criticized me harshly for my low educational background.
Can't you even handle something this simple? Typical uneducated quality, and you're not even a real asset to our team, you useless wreck.
These were the kinds of insults I faced daily from Sam. I hated Sam's torment and abuse, but I convinced myself, well, I'm lowly educated. Maybe it's true that I'm useless. My self-esteem was low compared to everyone else, especially since my failure to get into the high school. So even when Sam berated me, all I could do was weakly apologize. This pathetic attitude only irritated Sam more, and his insults towards me escalated. While these depressing days dragged on, I reached my 5th year at the company. At this point, Sam's harassment became extraordinarily intense. In retrospect, I think he was seriously trying to exhaust me both mentally and physically, aiming to drive me out of a company. As soon as the fifth fiscal year began, Sam called me in and suddenly dumped an enormous amount of work on me. It was easily 5 times the volume of work I had managed before. Moreover, it included tasks in areas where I lacked skills.
You've been freeloading here for 5 years now. No more mercy. Get this work done by the deadline or you'll find yourself out of a job.
Sam was setting a malicious trap, dripping with sarcasm, aiming to get rid of me. Unable to argue back, all I could muster was a bewildered "I'll try my best." At this time, for the first time in my life, I was struck by a fierce sense of urgency from the bottom of my heart that I had to do something. Fueled by a rage similar to anger towards my past inefficacies, I strongly wanted to prove Sam wrong, who always looked down on me. I spent sleepless nights pondering strategies, exhaustively searching online for any possible way to handle it successfully. Eventually, I concluded, this project can be largely solved by using a certain programming that I have absolutely no skills in, and can also save a lot of time. Although the programming was challenging, mastering it could greatly benefit my work and help me become a valued employee. I got these conclusions. Exactly as saying goes, every crisis is an opportunity. Until now, I had never immersed myself deeply to master anything, but at this moment, I resolved to dedicate my life to this challenge. I was done with being looked down upon, ridiculed, and insulted. Frustration can sometimes be a powerful catalyst for action. After work, I attended intensive programming courses and continued to study vigorously at home, sparing no time for sleep. Initially, my motivation was purely to ease my workload, but as I learned more, I gradually discovered the joy of programming and became engrossed in it. As a result, I was able to manage the increased workload with ease. And the quality of my work was highly praised by many. For the first time in 5 years as an inept and educated employee, I was recognized and valued by others in the company. My enthusiasm for learning programming grew, and my skills improved significantly. Consequently, my standing in the company rose rapidly. To my own disbelief, I became a rising star, attracting attention not just from other departments but also from outside the company. My programming skills and the high quality of my work even led to a lucrative headhunting offer from a multinational competitor. Being recognized and appreciated gradually restored my low self-esteem. The cycle of negativity that had plagued my work life turned around in a fascinating way. I became more proactive at work, and as a result, my communication with colleagues improved. Employees who once clearly despised me now looked at me with respect. My efforts caught the attention of the upper management, and I was entrusted with leading major, high-profile projects within the company. It was as if a bolt from the blue had changed my life in ways I had never even dared to dream of. As I rapidly made a name for myself, various people within the company began to speak highly of me.
How could someone as capable as Chris have been underperforming all this time? It's strange.
It seems Chris was only passive because of the harassment from his immediate boss, Sam. Was Sam jealous of Chris's talents and trying to crush him? Many employees began to whisper that Sam had been oppressing me, which had prevented me from excelling until now. These rumors eventually reached Sam's ears. Knowing about my success and the high regard I was held in did not sit well with him at all. "Just you watch, you uneducated useless fool, don't get cocky." Sam, who despised me, seemed to have thought of a dreadful plan at this time. The system I developed significantly streamlined operations across most departments, earning me widespread acclaim. Pleased to be recognized and make everyone happy, I pushed myself too hard and ended up falling ill. I had to take a few days off from work. After a few days of rest, my health improved. Fully recovered, I returned to work and attended a meeting for a massive project involving several other companies. Unexpectedly, a notable figure appeared at the inspection. It was Rachel Turner, the daughter of the family that owned Ace Trading. Our company, Ace Trading, was large enough to be classified as a major corporation, but had never gone public, maintaining a family-owned structure with a tradition of succession. Therefore, the president, Mr. Turner, was Rachel's father, and the chairman was her grandfather. Rachel herself, currently the executive vice president, was promised to be the next president. After the meeting, Rachel walked briskly over to me and said,
"So you're Chris. I'd appreciate it if you didn't overstep your bounds as if you represent us. Anyway, come to the president's office afterward."
I was summoned coldly and abruptly. It was definitely not a good call. It seemed that Rachel, the president's daughter, had taken a dislike to me for some reason. When I showed up at the president's office as instructed, Mr. Turner wasn't there, but Rachel was sitting at his desk, waiting. Shockingly, someone was standing beside the president's chair with a smug grin. It was none other than my manager, Sam. Without caring about my momentary surprise, Rachel launched into a tirade. "I've heard quite a lot about you from Sam here, Chris. I hear you were skiving off until yesterday. Seems like you've really been dragging the company down." I couldn't understand why Rachel was targeting me, but at that moment, I realized everything. Sam must have been feeding her all the negatives and past failures about me. I glared at Sam involuntarily, but he only returned a mocking smile. Rachel, clearly irritated by my silence, pressed on.
"Chris, it seems that you are a high school graduate with a really low level of education. I don't know how a bottom feeder who didn't even go to college could become an employee of our company. We can't entrust this important project to you with a low level of education."
Astonished by her rude remarks, I was at a loss for words. "Excuse me, but I was appointed as the project manager based solely on my track record in programming." I replied calmly, but this only made Rachel more furious, and she raised her eyebrows in anger. "Your assessment must be fraudulent. You must have cunningly stolen someone else's credit. I don't trust a dull man like you. You're stepping down from this project. Having someone like you represent us is an embarrassment." Faced with a level of disdain and scorn I hadn't experienced in a while, something inside me exploded.
"Embarrassment? Okay, I understand. Then I'll step down as the project manager, and while I'm at it, I'll resign from this company as well."
I had finally reached my breaking point. I had intended to prove myself in this company, but I couldn't muster the enthusiasm to continue under such a future president.
"That's perfect. We don't need someone like you here, isn't it right, Sam?"
Indeed. I threw them one last look of contempt and was about to leave the president's office when Rachel's voice hit me like a final blow.
"Make sure you leave no trace of yourself here. You'd be a stain on our company. Clean everything up and get out quickly."
Without responding, I left the president's office. When I reached my desk, I turned on my computer and did my last piece of work. I deleted all the files I had created, and disabling the internal system for which I held the patent. After packing up my personal belongings and emptying my desk, I left the company for good. After resigning from Ace Trading, I joined a multinational competitor that had been scouting me. The treatment at my new job was excellent. My salary was 10 times what it had been, plus significant performance bonuses. More than the financial rewards, I was thrilled by the freedom to work as I pleased. There were no malicious, toxic bosses like Sam. My proposals were quickly discussed in meetings, and if well received, immediately greenlit as new projects. Since the switch, I have truly enjoyed my programming work like never before. Leaving Ace Trading was truly the best decision. Ironically, I find myself grateful to Rachel and Sam. What happened to Ace Trading after I left? Following Rachel's parting words, the system I deleted became inoperable, and the company plunged into chaos. I had anticipated this, so I warned Rachel and Sam when I left.
"It's fine if you drive me out, but if you erase my traces, no one will be able to use the system I developed."
Still, Rachel and Sam scoffed and laughed it off.
No, it's actually convenient. Let's scrap that pathetic system you developed. I've always hated it. We'll just create a better one.
Even after I warned them out of kindness, they responded with such ingratitude that I said, "Oh, really? Then please do as you please. But don't come prying to me later because I won't know anything about it." And I left the company with that ultimatum. However, afterwards, each workplace within the company fell into complete panic. It was only natural, as the core internal system suddenly stopped working, and it was replaced by a less convenient and inferior system every step of the way. Employee dissatisfaction and stress peaked, and they flooded Rachel and Sam with complaints.
It's because you drove Chris out that this has happened. It's not working at all. Do something, bring Chris back.
Or apologize to him and let us use his system. The employees were furious, nearly attacking Rachel and Sam, but they remained defiant.
How can we do such a humiliating thing? Figure it out yourselves. That's your job. Chris is not needed here, so there's no way we'll bring him back. Just adapt and use a new system.
Faced with such insincere and irresponsible answers, the employees snapped. Unable to endure a workplace that only demanded self-help from its staff, employees began to resign one after another, creating an extraordinary situation. Once that cycle started, it didn't stop. Initially, the company tried to compensate for the staff shortage by hiring temp agencies, but that quickly reached its limits, and operations began to falter. Across the company's departments, the quality of work significantly dropped, and gaps in transactions and other credibility issues arose. As a result, Ace Trading's social credit dropped to the extreme, and its longtime business partners cut contracts one after another. Furthermore, the financial statements continued to show significant operational deficits, leading to insolvency, and eventually, Ace Trading went bankrupt. After the bankruptcy, under corporate restructuring laws, the multinational company I joined acquired Ace Trading, and the earnest employees were retained. However, Rachel and the former management family were ousted. Sam, her sycophant, was completely dismissed as well. Interestingly, it was only then that Sam came to seek my help. Dismissed and cornered, he desperately turned to me, his supposed enemy, begging for help.
I took care of you so much in the past. Please, can you help me fix things?
I was utterly astounded by Sam's audacity.
You took care of me? You mean you harassed and looked down on me? If I am to appeal anything to the higher-ups,
it would be to advise them not to hire someone deceitful and mean-spirited like you. In response to my words, Sam was furious and pretended to throw his phone, but he stopped halfway and left dejectedly. I heard through the grapevine that for a while, Sam's wife worked in the nightlife industry to maintain their lifestyle, but that didn't last long. Eventually, they had to sell their luxury condo near central New York and move to Connecticut. His daughter, who had been attending a prestigious private elementary school, was transferred to a public school in Connecticut, as they could no longer afford the tuition. Sam is now crawling around as a salesperson in a Connecticut real estate company unrelated to his previous work. Naturally, for someone who only learned to get ahead by scheming, this was to be expected. Now, not only Sam but his entire family is experiencing hardship and exposed to the harsh realities of the world. The Turner family, the business owners, has also fallen into decline. Rachel and her father's luxurious New York homes were sold, and now they live quietly in the suburbs of San Diego. It took time, but it was indeed a fitting end for such wicked people, just like the saying, "Heaven's net is wide and lets nothing through." What goes around comes around. As for my current situation, thanks to my successive achievements at the multinational company I joined, I have become well known in the industry. After further leveling up and developing new systems and apps, I gained enough confidence from the royalties alone to go independent, and last year, I finally started my own company. Now I'm running my own business. It is challenging, but every day is fulfilling and enjoyable. Being able to work with excitement every day is a truly fortunate thing, when I think about it. Looking back, I regret my apathetic and half-hearted teenage years following my failure, but I also recognize that it is precisely those setbacks that have led to where I am now. Is it okay for a man over 50 like me to still want these things? Her voice asking me to try just one more time shook my self-control. My name is Daniel. As a single father, I raised my son, who is now 25, and before I knew it, I turned 55. It's been 10 years since my wife, Michelle, passed away. The memories of those days are still vivid in my mind. Michelle complained about feeling bloated, and although I thought it was nothing serious, I encouraged her to visit the hospital. However, the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer with only 1 month to live. I couldn't believe it. After all, my wife looked healthy right before me. Michelle and our son, Andrew, panicked about the sudden news. That's when I decided to take some time off from work. I'm a carpenter. I plunged into this world right after graduating from high school. At the time, I was working on building a new house, commissioned by an architect I was close with. When I explained the situation, both the architect and the client readily agreed to delay the construction period. For the month until Michelle passed away, I devoted myself to caring for her at home, fully supporting Andrew as well. I made sure to live those days without any regrets. It was the most intense month of my life. After she passed away and I was organizing her belongings, I found a drawer filled with numerous letters. There were letters prepared for Andrew to receive each year until he turned 20, titled Dear Andrew, Dear 16-year-old Andrew, Dear 17-year-old Andrew, and even one for when he gets married, titled Dear Andrew on his wedding day. And I found a letter addressed to me as well. I carefully opened the envelope and read it. The list included age-specific gifts she wanted to give Andrew for his birthdays, his favorite recipes, and mine. It even detailed instructions on how to perform various household tasks. How had she written so much without me noticing? After receiving her terminal diagnosis, she was energetic for about a week, but then quickly deteriorated. Perhaps the weak pen pressure in some places was from when she wasn't feeling well. Imagining Michelle writing these letters in pain brought tears to my eyes. And on the last page, it was written, Dear Daniel, after I settle in heaven, fall in love again, nurture love with someone else, I look forward to discussing your wonderful qualities with that person in heaven. I cried. It had been a while since the funeral, but I had never cried until then. I felt it was unmanly, and somehow, tears just wouldn't come. But upon reading this letter, I cried. It was probably the most I had ever cried in my life. I couldn't imagine feeling up for romance at all. That letter felt like a final farewell, and I kept it hidden deep in the drawer. Even when I opened the drawer to check what to give Andrew for his birthday, I made sure not to look at that last letter. It's been 10 years since then. Even now, at 55, I don't feel like getting into a relationship. Andrew, now 25, still lives at home. I've suggested countless times that he should consider living on his own, but, Dad, I'm getting married, he suddenly announced one day. Despite all my urging for him to move out, the thought of him actually leaving felt lonely. Whether he knew how melancholic I felt or not, he cheerfully shared his news. She's a bit older than me, but she's beautiful. It was love at first sight at a mixer, and I really pursued her. When can I bring her over? He seemed a bit shy yet visibly happy. I could tell he had found a good partner as the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. My work schedule is flexible, so I can make time whenever needed. When I told him to let me know a convenient day, he quickly left. He mentioned he was going on a date. Is today okay? He asked, but I advised against it since neither I nor his partner were probably ready, and sent him off on his date. Really, he has grown into a man who lacks consideration. But I raised him, so maybe it can't be helped. Speaking of which, I remembered there was a gift Michelle wanted to give him for his wedding, and for the first time in a long while, I rummaged through the drawer. I hadn't opened the drawer for 5 years since the letters were meant to be given to him only until he turned 20. As I was searching through the drawer, a piece of paper fluttered down. A glimpse of Dear Daniel caught my eye. It was the last page of that letter. The letter that was supposed to be at the bottom of the drawer had fallen out. It was as if it was insisting on something. What could it be? Laughing off the sudden thought, I put the letter back deep in the drawer. 1 week after Andrew announced his engagement, he brought his fiancée to meet me. I am Jessica. Nice to meet you. The woman who looked me straight in the eye was 28, 3 years older than Andrew. It seems you were nervous too, Daniel. Taken aback by her comment, I was momentarily confused. Turning to Andrew, I noticed he was frowning. Dad, your shirt is inside out. Ah, shoot. As I scrambled, Jessica burst out laughing. That's it, I can't handle it. I love how funny you are, Daniel. Her saying I love you caught me off guard. This girl, she reminds me of someone. Especially her smiling face looks like someone. But who was it? Lately, these things don't come to mind easily. I don't know much about recent pop stars or actresses, but she must look like some celebrity. Deciding to blame it on my age, I stopped trying to figure out who Jessica resembled. She seems like a fine young lady, I thought as I watched Jessica and Andrew leave through the front door. I spoke to Michelle's photo. Michelle, don't you think Andrew has caught a fine woman? She was very classy. We're going to meet her parents soon. I'll make sure not to wear my shirt inside out then. They say we're going to eat French food. Remember, we went just once. The napkins and all those knives were quite a hassle. Her mother is a single mom too. It's good. It would have been hard to face both of them alone. I talked aimlessly and then stood up. It felt like Michelle was smiling a little. On the day of the meal, I checked my shirt carefully and headed to the restaurant in my suit. Andrew was also in a suit, and Jessica wore a beautiful dress. Jessica, who had been checking her mobile phone, turned to me with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, my mother will be a little late due to work. She wants us to go in first, she said. So, we decided to enter the restaurant. The table was set beautifully with a cream-colored tablecloth, dishes, cutlery, and napkins all neatly arranged. Just seeing this made me a bit nervous. Uncharacteristically, I had studied up on the internet. The napkin, I remembered, goes like this on my lap. As I was about to pick up the napkin, a small shriek from Jessica made me jump. Hey, what are you doing? Looking up, I saw Andrew picking up the finger bowl, about to drink the water. Hot what? He didn't even understand what he was being scolded for. It seems I should have made Andrew brush up on his manners. That's not drinking water. Look, this is how you wash your fingers. Watching her instruct briskly, I was suddenly reminded of my high school days. I was often scolded like that too. By a girl who was the class rep and my first girlfriend. Back then, I was planning to go straight into carpentry instead of pursuing further education, so I was quite the troublemaker. I fell for a girl who wasn't afraid to scold me whenever I acted up. Initially, she was my nemesis, but somehow we ended up dating. Oh right, she confessed to me. She said she couldn't just leave me be. I never expected a class rep to fall for me, so it was quite a surprise and a delight. Come to think of it, Jessica's way of scolding. It's a bit like how she used to scold. Now that I think about it, even her face. Wait, what was her name? As I pondered this, a woman appeared, saying, "Sorry I'm late." The face I had just been remembering, now slightly marked by wrinkles. She seemed like a doppelganger of the woman in my mind, and I couldn't help but exclaim, "Could it be?" Then, I recalled the class rep's name and said it out loud. "Nicole." The woman widened her eyes and looked at me intently. Apparently, she didn't remember right away. "It's me, Daniel, remember, from high school." As I began to explain, realization dawned on her face. "What, Daniel? No way, She seemed hesitant to continue, so I took over. "I've grown a bit, haven't I?" Laughing heartily, Nicole blushed. "Sorry, you've, well, not so much gotten fat as become more robust." She didn't forget to put a positive spin on it. "That's right. She was always like that." You two know each other?" We had left the main subjects of the meeting, our children, behind. As I pondered how to explain, Nicole boldly declared, "We were classmates in high school. Actually, we dated back then." The children were visibly shocked by her revelation. I hadn't expected her to disclose that we dated, and it flustered me a bit. As if anticipating my disarray, Nicole blurted out, "There's no point hiding it. Isn't it a miracle? Our children, who we dated in high school, are getting married to each other." She seemed a bit excited. Understandably so. I was excited too. Actually, I was still feeling quite surreal. What are the odds? The conversation flowed freely from then on, and time flew by quickly, and before we knew it, we had finished dessert. Initially, the focus was on the children. I described Andrew as a bit of a show-off, a troublemaker like me, and so carefree that he wouldn't even bother to prepare for occasions like this. Nicole, while being glared at by Jessica, happily talked about how Jessica was so serious and responsible that she never thought she would get married, but was delighted that she could marry such a wonderful person. Then the conversation turned to us. Nicole knew my wife had passed away, as she had heard it from Jessica. She consoled me, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to lose my wife during Andrew's sensitive teenage years, and how hard it surely was. Nicole mentioned that she had divorced her husband due to personality differences when Jessica was in elementary school. Her ex-husband quickly remarried, but she had been too busy raising Jessica alone to think about her own relationships, remaining single since then. As we were deep in conversation, I noticed the kids watching us. They seemed to be smirking a bit. "They look good together, don't they?" Andrew commented, looking at Jessica. To which Jessica jokingly replied, "Why don't they just date then? Don't tease us." I glared at them, but Nicole just looked relaxed. "Oh, come on, it's fine, you've become so rigid," she teased. It felt like the roles of the class rep and the mischievous boy had reversed. Despite being a single mother, Nicole had aged gracefully. After chatting for a while longer, we parted ways. I had put on weight, but she hadn't changed much. She usually wears suits for work, and they really look sharp on her. While thinking about this, Andrew and I were walking home. He teased again, "Didn't it seem like there was a good vibe?" At my age, what good vibe could there possibly be? I retorted sharply. But he continued teasing, hey, could something happen between you two?" Furthermore, he added, "Why did you guys break up? It seemed fine. Oh, if you had stayed together, would I not have been born?" I decided to ignore that comment. "Why did we break up?" That's right. Nicole went to college, and I pursued carpentry. We ended up in a long-distance relationship, and our lifestyles were so different that we mutually agreed to part ways. We had been together for just over a year, starting when we were seniors in high school. As I pondered this, he cheerfully mentioned, "We'll be seeing each other a lot during the wedding preparations, so good luck." Should parents even be this involved in wedding planning? In my time, it was mostly just the couple doing the preparations. but times might have changed. I didn't mind meeting her, though. Indeed, we ended up seeing each other frequently at the planning meetings. Whether or not dresses and tuxedos suited them was one thing, but choosing the color and type of paper for the invitations seemed trivial to me. However, Nicole, holding an invitation envelope, excitedly remarked, "Oh, this green is lovely. This one's cute too, but pink might be too much for Andrew, don't you think? What do you think, Daniel?" Caught in the spotlight, I pointed to the pink envelopes she favored. "Wow, Dad, that's your taste," he exclaimed. "Such matters should be left to the preferences of women." I'd have to give him a proper talk about that later. "You probably reacted the same way when you were young, didn't you, Daniel?" she said playfully, giving me an upward glance. "I wonder if it's a testament to your wife's education." Thoughtfully, Nicole says. It seems Nicole had easily figured out that I was accommodating her preferences. Being so involved in the wedding venue felt somewhat uncomfortable. Though Andrew insisted, and I reluctantly accompanied him, these minor exchanges were somewhat enjoyable. Once we get married, should all four of us live together? It sounds like it could be fun. After the color of the invitations was decided and the planner left, leaving just the four of us, Jessica dropped this bombshell. I blushed deeply and denied it outright. Nicole was laughing. Could it be that she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea? If we could laugh together like this, maybe remarriage wasn't such a bad idea. But surely, it was unthinkable for the parents of the children getting married to each other to also marry. Nicole may have aged beautifully, but I had become more robust due to my job, complete with a beer belly. I found myself daydreaming about a life with Nicole, only to dismiss the thought almost immediately. Though it was a bit exhausting, the thrill of our enjoyable conversation lingered as Andrew and I returned home. The house felt unusually cold and bleak. Perhaps it was a backlash from the happy feelings I had just experienced. One photo frame in the living room caught my eye. I realized I hadn't spoken to Michelle in a while. I stared blankly at her photo. The dust-covered frame felt like a blow to my head, proof of my recent neglect. I picked up her photo and wiped off the dust. "Sorry about this, letting so much dust gather." I spoke softly. Of course, there was no reply from her. What was I getting so carried away about? Thinking about romance at this point, I'd be doing you wrong, wouldn't I? I muttered again. There was a noise from behind. I wondered if Andrew had overheard my disheartened voice. After that, I started making excuses to avoid going to the planning meetings I was invited to. Although work was a bit busier, I simply didn't feel like attending. Nicole, with whom I had exchanged contact details, occasionally sent me messages to check in with the results of the planning meetings. However, I ignored those messages too. A grown man indulging in romance seemed undignified. Yes, I feared that if I kept meeting Nicole, I wouldn't be able to stop my feelings. I didn't deserve to face Michelle. To dispel my feelings for Nicole, I polished the photo frame until it sparkled. Then, a few months later, the day of Andrew and Jessica's wedding arrived. Since I hadn't replied to Nicole's messages, it felt awkward to face her, so I just exchanged brief greetings and then paced restlessly in the lobby, striking up idle conversations with relatives on the groom's side. As the reception began, things got busy. I toasted with guests and made small talk. Nicole was doing the same. Somehow, I felt relieved that there was some distance between us. Because Nicole looked breathtakingly beautiful in her finery. Standing next to her, it felt like my heart might just jump out. The reception proceeded smoothly, and as the atmosphere settled, a spotlight suddenly shone on me. Andrew and Jessica, the bride and groom, looked at me with surprised expressions. I had arranged a surprise with the planner. Thank you all for being here today. Now, I would like to read a letter from my wife in heaven, addressed to Andrew and Jessica. As I spoke into the microphone, he stared at me wide-eyed. Dear Andrew, congratulations on your wedding. Dear the bride, Jessica, thank you for marrying Andrew. I filled in the blank where it was written to the bride, and read it aloud. This was the last letter Michelle had written before she passed away. Have you learned to eat eggplants you used to hate? I read, and laughter spilled from Andrew's friends. He still hates eggplants. I continued reading the letter impassively to avoid getting choked up with tears. Soft sobbing could be heard around the venue. This reception. I am watching from the sky. I am so happy to see you looking incredibly joyful. May you both be happy forever. Take good care of Jessica. With that, I folded the letter, concluding the emotional moment. I was fidgety partly because of this. Until I finished reading Michelle's letter, I felt barely alive. After completing this important task, I let out a huge sigh of relief. Andrew was teary-eyed but looked at me and grinned mischievously. What was that sly smile about? As I started to feel less tense and more aware of my surroundings, I noticed that the spotlight had shifted to Andrew. He then took the microphone in his hand. What was he planning to do with the microphone? As I wondered, he also took a letter. Familiar pink stationery. It was the same kind of paper I was holding in my hand. Could it be? From mother to father, I have a letter to read on her behalf, he announced, sending a shock through me. As I stood there dazed, his lips curled into a mischievous grin. Actually, there are two letters, one for if father had remarried, and one for if he hadn't. Since he hasn't remarried, I'll read this one, he said, and the room erupted in laughter. My brain was still trying to catch up. Dear Daniel, so you still haven't remarried? His dramatic shout prompted more laughter from the crowd. You were told to fall in love, but you're still the serious Daniel, aren't you? But see, Andrew is getting married and looks happy, right? I want you to find happiness too. Since Andrew is starting his own family, you should too, Daniel. And there was a pause before the next words. I look forward to the day in heaven when I can talk about your wonderful qualities with your new partner. Indeed, those were the words. The last words I had tucked away deep in a drawer. I bawled my eyes out. Unbecoming of my age, in front of many eyes, I couldn't stop sobbing. While the MC cleverly filled up the gap with an ad-lib, I managed to compose myself, holding a handkerchief in one hand. Influenced by my sobs, Andrew and Jessica, tears in their eyes, took the microphone. And both began speaking simultaneously. Mom, Dad. Nicole and I exchanged surprised glances. We've decided to read a letter from both of us to both our parents. Andrew and Jessica began speaking in turns. I was quite the troublemaker, he confessed. His words sent a wave of laughter through the crowd. And I was the typical class rep, she added. This time, laughter enveloped the bride's side of the room. Dad was a troublemaker too. The spotlight turned to me. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Mom was also a class rep. Nicole's eyes widened in surprise. I am forever grateful to my dad, who raised me alone. I am forever grateful to my mom, who raised me alone. Their words synchronized perfectly. And now, I will be happy with Jessica. I, too, will be happy with Andrew. And so, the two said together, please make sure Dad and Mom are also happy. I can tell that Nicole is shivering next to me. When I try to look at Nicole, Andrew suddenly shouts, Dad. Startled, I look straight at Andrew again. Talking with Mom in heaven, that must be Nicole's job. Hearing him shout that, I panic. Don't say such reckless things. You're making Nicole uncomfortable. As I say that, Jessica grabs the microphone. Mom, it's not so bad, right? Hearing her words, I finally look at Nicole, who has her face covered with her hands, blushing to her ears. Then, Nicole's lips move. It's not something I should say in front of everyone. Nicole whispers to me in a voice so low that only I can hear. I know you care deeply for Michelle. Those words stir my heart. And they make me hopeful. Should I, a man over 50, still hope for such things? But, shall we try it just one more time? Her whispered continuation shakes my self-control. Andrew and Jessica seem to hear it, as they are both smiling broadly. Trying not to look at their faces, I speak to Nicole. But, it's not fair to Michelle or you. Barely squeezing out the words, Nicole chuckles. Silly. I'll probably get along famously with Michelle in heaven. After all, we have the same taste in men. Knocked out by her words. Thinking about our children marrying and dismarrying too, it's bizarre. Concerned about looking foolish in front of relatives, friends of our children, I let go of all such worries and embrace Nicole. I remember the first time I held her during high school. It was after she confessed her feelings to me. Just like that time, I make the same promise as I did in high school, to cherish her delicate and slender form. I will always be there for you. This time for sure. I add those words to my old vow. Years later, I'm pacing between the living room and the front door. Seeing me, Nicole sighs at Michelle's picture, exasperated. Can you see him? He can't settle down. She speaks to Michelle. You've met Annie at the hospital, right? What's got you so fidgety? Challenge, I retort. It's her first time coming to this house. Annie is our granddaughter. Nicole dismisses my argument with the okay, and sits down by the window. She gestures for me to come over. I obediently follow. Sitting and looking out at the garden, I see a small tree reaching up to the sky. Nicole and I planted it when we remarried. Given our age, we don't have much time left. Feeling faint-hearted, I mentioned this to Nicole, who bought a sapling. Let's live long enough to see this tree grow taller than the house, and then have a nice chat with Michelle. Her smile as she said this is dazzling, and I'm reminded of it every time I see this tree. It seems like it will take a while for that tree to reach the roof. Hearing that, Nicole says, let's make lots of memories in that time. Nicole rests her small head on my shoulder. I wrap my arm around her shoulders. I love this peaceful moment by the window. It feels like Michelle is laughing behind us. Just then, I hear the sound of a car engine. Oh, looks like they are here. It's probably Andrew and Jessica's car. They've come to visit, bringing our first grandchild. We need to greet them. Nicole and I exchange glances, stand up, and walk towards the entrance.
Ryan, are the side dishes ready? Yes. All that's left is to add the sauce right before serving. Good. Yes, it tastes great. Well done. Thank you very much. My name is Ryan. I'm currently training at a French restaurant. I've never forgotten the atmosphere of the French restaurant we visited as a family when I was a child, which inspired me to pursue this career. As a child, the atmosphere of a formal French restaurant felt quite stiff. Yet, within its subtly thrilling atmosphere, I found warmth. The dishes, unlike hamburgers or fried chicken, had intricate decorations. Each dish presented a different flavor profile. It was like stepping into a world of paintings. I pretended to go to the bathroom and snooped around the restaurant. Everything was immaculately organized, and I was simply overwhelmed. Only the kitchen was bustling and chaotic. The party of 5 in the private room has arrived. The main dish is ready. Pull up 5 fish from the tank and prepare them. Even the most graceful swan paddles frantically under the water. These people were creating this wonderful place. Seeing this as a child thrilled me. And that's when I decided on my future dream. I wanted to become a chef so badly that I didn't go to college but instead started as an apprentice at a French restaurant. The first few years were filled with dishwashing. I wasn't even allowed to prep the ingredients. Honestly, there were times I almost gave up. But I kept at my training and eventually was trusted to handle the side dishes. The once stern-faced head chef, Walter, now praises my seasoning. I am definitely making improvement. That made me very happy and proud. I have a brother who is 3 years older. His name is Charles. We look somewhat alike, being brothers, but he chose a completely different path. He graduated from a prestigious university and now works at a well-known company. He's what you'd call an elite. Not only is he smart, but he's also popular and admired by his peers. Having such a brother was a great support. And I admired him. I used to follow him around, mimicking everything he did. He probably found me endearing. He took care of me without any complaints. But at some point, a distance grew between us. Why start working? Shouldn't you go to college? You're just running away because you don't want to study, aren't you? Because I want to become a chef. You can't train in cooking at a college, can you? Being a chef. Ryan, are you serious? How are you going to live your life without a college degree? Think about it seriously. I am thinking about it. After thinking it over, I've decided this is what I want to do. It seems Charles doesn't like the idea of me pursuing a career as a chef. Every time we meet, he persistently complains. What about your exam studies? I've told you, I'm not studying. I'm going to work. I've said it many times, but I'm going to be a chef. You're still talking in your sleep? Becoming a chef is impossible. Don't use it as an excuse to run away from exams. I'm serious about this. I wonder. You're just saying that to avoid facing reality. What do you mean you want to be a chef? Ugh. Being ridiculed for my dream was more than I could bear. Angered, I finally said what I had been thinking to him. What about you, bro? You got into a good university, but what are you going to do with that? Have you decided what you want for your future? He fell silent, as if I had hit him where it hurts. He always seemed to outdo me. There might have been a thrill in besting him this time. I had said too much. You're just jealous that I'm pursuing my dream. Mom and Dad always say, you are amazing, and you're just desperately trying to live up to that. Have you even figured out what you want to do or who you want to be? He frowned. I always spoke of becoming a chef, but he had never once talked about his own dreams. He probably knew I was right. He glared at me. His look was full of resentment and jealousy. And then he hit me with harsh words too. The reality isn't so sweet that you can just do what you want and survive. Someone who doesn't go to college can't make it in this world. Remember that. This is how our once close relationship became strained. One day, Charles brought his fiancée home to meet the family. The lady was elegant and beautiful. I had to admit, she was truly a match for Charles. My name is Sophie. She greeted us diligently. Charles had on a smug expression. Our parents seemed to like her too, making for a very successful meeting. She had met Charles through a friend's introduction. She also worked in administration at a well-known company. Though they worked nearby and started seeing each other often, they initially thought they had nothing in common. But she was very considerate and also a good cook. Charles fell hard for her, and that's how they ended up planning to marry. Are you nervous? Not at all. Please don't say weird things. Haha, relax and get comfortable. Oh, I'm fine, really. They made a painfully perfect couple. I watched the two of them interact with a dazed expression. Then, she spoke to me. You're Ryan, the younger brother, right? Ah, yes. I'm Ryan. I look forward to getting to know you. She smiled warmly. This person is going to be my sister-in-law. Thinking this made me smile. However, that good impression was shattered in an instant. Which university did you graduate from, Ryan? Our parents had just left the room. She asked this suddenly. Ah, I didn't go to college. I'm currently training to become a chef. As I responded, she visibly grimaced. Is that so? I heard you were a chef, but I never imagined you hadn't attended university. Her words were laced with thorns. Excuse me for saying this, but since Charles works at a famous company, I assumed you also attended a prestigious university. To think you only finished high school. There's quite a difference between the brothers, isn't there? She gave a meaningful laugh. It was clear she looked down on me. But I am pursuing my dream, and I have skills recognized by the head chef, at least. The shift from a good impression to this was too great. She might be a wolf in sheep's clothing, despite her demure appearance. I couldn't hide my irritation and retorted. Are you with Charles because he graduated from college and works at a famous company? What are you saying, Ryan? Before she could react, Charles scolded me. Ryan, do you see? This is the common perception. These days, people look down on those who only finish high school. If it bothers you so much, why don't you quit being a chef and go to college now? If I've offended you, I apologize. Like Charles said, I was just surprised. Because, well, just high school, you know. Sophie smiled slightly in apology. Her insincere expression was extremely unpleasant. Ryan, you're just doing what you want, so your life must be easy, right? Really? If only everyone could just live doing what they love, how wonderful that would be. The two of them looked at me and laughed mockingly. A few days after Charles introduced his fiancée. Is that Sophie? She came as a guest to the French restaurant where I was training. She was accompanied by an unfamiliar man. The man's appearance was not exactly respectable. He looked like the type who might throw a punch if you bumped into him on the street. Feeling I shouldn't be seen, I quickly hid and watched what was happening. So, when will it be? The deadline is next month, you know? You know what happens if it passes. The interest will just keep increasing. I understand. Well, with your looks, you could probably become popular at a nightclub. The man's sleazy laughter echoed. No way. I was stunned to learn her secret. From what I overheard, it seems she has debts. And they appear to be substantial. Does Charles know about this? As I wondered, a shocking statement reached my ears. Don't worry, I have a way to pay it back. My fiancé earns a lot and is a yes man. I plan to sweet-talk him into arranging the money. You're planning to exploit your fiancé? Poor guy. It's my prerogative how I gather the money, isn't it? Well, that's true. My apologies. My heart nearly burst. I had sensed something off about her, but this was beyond my worst suspicions. Without any hint of remorse, she openly discussed her plan to extract money from Charles with this man. So please, stay away from me. I have a wedding at the end of the month. Someone like you showing up could ruin everything. Indeed, that would be problematic. Thank you for your cooperation. Sophie coldly smiled and left the restaurant without placing an order. Scary woman. The man's involuntary comment made sense. Her true nature was indeed that of a scary woman. After much deliberation, I decided to inform Charles. Our relationship wasn't the best, and I had no obligation to help him, but I couldn't just stand by and let him be deceived. However, as expected, he was reluctant to believe me. You're just jealous, aren't you? Trying to mess up my marriage, huh? Why would I do something like that? What do I gain from lying about this? I've never seen her act the way you described. How can you expect me to believe this? That's what I've been trying to tell you, Charles. You're being used. You should call off the wedding and break up with her now. Oh. And if you doubt it that much, come to the restaurant. She and that guy should be on the security camera. Being informed about the evidence, he had to believe it. I could hear his teeth gritting. It's really true, isn't it? That's what I've been trying to tell you. It was a harsh truth. I stated it plainly. Sophie, that woman. She was deceiving me. His anger was palpable even through the phone. It felt like he might crush his phone from the sheer force of his fury. Cautiously, I asked him, "What are you going to do? Break up with her?" I hate to say it, but Sophie plans to bleed you dry. If you're going to break up, you need to handle it carefully. Ugh. I couldn't help but feel sympathy for his situation. However, I hoped he wouldn't resort to rough tactics. Behind her were some dangerous people. As I pondered this, Charles surprisingly asked me to keep it between us. Hey, Ryan. Can we keep this just between the two of us? Huh? You mean forgive her? I'm going to make her regret trying to use me. I need a little time to plan. All right. After ending the call, I sighed. She's not someone to be taken lightly. The image of her in the restaurant flashed through my mind. I didn't know what Charles was planning, but they continued to prepare for the wedding as if nothing was amiss. Meanwhile, I was constantly worried. Doesn't he believe me? Despite my suspicions, there were no signs of trouble between them. The wedding was now only a day away. Confused by Charles's unreadable intentions, I was startled when she suddenly spoke to me. What's going on? Did I startle you? No, just lost in thought. I laughed it off. However, she seemed indifferent to my discomfort and bluntly stated her business. I hope this won't upset you, but are you attending the wedding, Ryan? Huh. If you do attend, please make sure no one finds out you're just a high school graduate. Many people from Charles's company will be there, as well as my relatives and colleagues. So please, do be careful. We wouldn't want the wedding to be spoiled. Not content with just squeezing money out of Charles, she now aimed to crush my pride as well. My patience snapped. Then I'll just decline to attend the wedding. That should put you at ease, right? I delivered the sarcasm as sharply as I could. However, she simply clapped her hands and said cheerily, "That would be helpful, thank you." Watching her leave with a satisfied look on her face filled me with a helpless anger. On the day of the wedding, although I had promised her I wouldn't attend, Charles pleaded for me to come, so I reluctantly agreed to participate. When she saw me at the venue, contrary to our agreement, she glared at me with a look of betrayal, but I simply ignored her. The ceremony concluded without any issues. Then we moved to the reception hall. As Sophie had warned, the venue was crowded with many guests. Probably close to 100. It was fitting for Charles as an elite businessman. While thinking this, I took my seat among our relatives. Just as I was starting to feel weary of the tedious congratulatory speeches, the toast was finally given, allowing us to start eating. Everyone was about to dig into the cuisine of the upscale hotel, wondering about its quality, when a voice interrupted. "Excuse me, please, I need a moment. There's something I must share with everyone." The voice belonged to Charles. As we faced yet another delay, amidst the grumbling crowd, he continued. "I have prepared a slideshow. Please watch." Pointing to a huge screen set up at the back of the hall, he signaled the staff, "Please go ahead." Then, it appeared. What? What is this? Isn't that Sophie? Who's that shady-looking guy next to her? Does Sophie have dealings with shady people? What's going on? An affair? Cheating? The venue buzzed with shock as they viewed the images on the slide. It showed Sophie with the same man I had seen her with at the restaurant. "This woman in the images is undoubtedly her, Sophie," Charles declared. The murmurs grew louder. Confused, embarrassed, and agitated, Sophie shouted, "What is this? What does this mean?" She reached out frantically, trying to grab the microphone from Charles, but she couldn't reach it. Meanwhile, he ignored her and stepped in front of the slides. I accidentally discovered that Sophie was associating with this unsavory man. Upon investigating, I found out that she has debts of $100,000. As you might guess, the man is involved in illegal lending. He pointed to the man in the slide and added, $100,000. Sophie, why? But that's not all. She was scheming to saddle me with her debts. Charles then grabbed documents he had hidden behind the screen, held them high, and then scattered them across the floor. Several reports slid smoothly across the surface, spreading out for all to see. Detective agency's findings. What? This can't be true. Let me see that. The venue turned into absolute chaos. Sophie was nearly hysterical. But as they say, you reap what you sow. Inside, I felt a vindictive satisfaction. And in the midst of this turmoil, Charles once again took the microphone. What she was trying to do could be considered marriage fraud. However, I want to forgive her, he declared. His words brought everyone to a halt. I stared at him in disbelief. Yet he was not joking. His demeanor was serious. I want to forgive Sophie, Charles repeated once again. His tone had completely changed from before, becoming very gentle. The venue fell silent. He looked straight at Sophie and spoke to her. I can't forgive the despicable act of trying to push the debt onto me. But, Sophie, I know why you ended up with a debt of $100,000. Charles took out a photo from his pocket. What? What did he take out? Everyone looked at his hands. As if anticipating this, the screen showed the cute exterior of a cake shop. Sophie, before you joined your current company, you ran a cake shop, right? This shop, right? You worked hard to become a pastry chef and finally managed to own a shop, didn't you? But it didn't go well, and the business failed. You ended up with a debt of $100,000. It must have been tough. Not just financially, but mentally too. But you didn't want to inconvenience the staff who worked with you, so you used your own money to pay 3 months' salary to all the staff. And that's not all. You also looked for a new job for them. It's not something you can do when you're struggling with a shattered dream and a debt of $100,000. He continued speaking while returning to the stage where she was. The real you is such a wonderful person who can be so kind to others. Isn't that right? It was a truth I didn't know. After receiving my report, Charles desperately investigated with the help of experts. He couldn't believe that someone would do something like this without reason. You know, I've always lived my life worrying about what others think. I've been pretending to be a good kid even though I felt stifled. That's why I thought I had to go to a good university and get a good job. He looked away from her and looked at me. That's why I envied Ryan so much. He pursued his dreams. I envied him for being able to freely pursue his dreams. Charles. It was some time ago, right? You told me, you envy me for pursuing my dreams, right? You were right. His face expressed regret. I must have been awful. I was jealous of Sophie too. She must have been working hard every day to pursue her dream, just like Ryan. And then she must have despaired when things didn't go well. And she must have thought of something like this, right? He returned to her side and gently wiped away her overflowing tears. Then, as if proposing, he knelt down, took her hand, and said, I've decided something in my heart because of this incident. I've been neglecting my own will while worrying about what others think. But from now on, I want to value my own will. Like Ryan and the old Sophie. So, Sophie, I will take on your debt willingly. And I want to support you in pursuing your dream of becoming a pastry chef again. After the tumultuous wedding reception, Charles and Sophie apologized to me for mocking my education. I'm really sorry about the educational background thing. I said terrible things. It's okay, really. I was jealous of you too. I envied you for pursuing your dreams, shining so brightly. I'm really sorry. I really do support your dream. I have to apologize properly too. Ryan, I'm sorry for everything. I'm looking forward to you becoming a chef. Charles is indeed a strong ally for me. And now my sister-in-law has joined too. I'll become the best chef ever. I answered proudly. Keep your passport deep in your bag. I know, geez, just like Dad. I'm worried. And make sure you're near the gate 20 minutes early. If you're so worried, why don't you come with Sophie? I have things to do here. While I'm honing my skills as a pastry chef, Charles will work hard in the US and prepare to open a new shop. Wow, are you showing off your good relationship? Hee. Charles paid off her debt in full. Moreover, he even managed to finance her study abroad in Paris to fulfill her dream of becoming a pastry chef. Oh, the security gate is open. Sophie, don't get on the wrong plane. Geez, Charles. I'm sorry. Conversations like this will be put on hold for a while. It feels lonely to think about it. I shouted to her as she passed through the security gate. Chef or pastry chef, it's a competition to see who succeeds first, Sophie. She showed her best smile and nodded vigorously.
Is there anyone with a medical background on board? We need to hurry, an elderly person needs help. I used to be a doctor, I said, raising my hand. Please help us, urged by a beautiful flight attendant. I proceeded to the front of the plane. This is the story of a once brilliant surgeon who was ousted from the medical world and encountered a crisis while returning to his rural hometown by plane. My name is Eugene. I was a doctor until just the other day. I was a neurosurgeon at a university hospital, and since my residency, I was favored by the professor, which allowed me to accompany him to conferences even ahead of other senior doctors. Soon after, a paper I presented at a conference was recognized, and at the age of 29, I was hailed as a genius neurosurgeon. As my fame increased from TV appearances and writing magazine columns, my clinic became so popular that there was a 2-month wait for an appointment. The hospital's policy was that while general appointments took 2 months, celebrities and the like were given priority in treatment. I primarily cared for patients in VIP private rooms, alongside my mentor and chief physician, Dr. Maxwell. My smooth career began to derail after Dr. Maxwell retired. Dr. Maxwell was a significant figure within the hospital's power dynamics, having been a powerful ally as a friend of the hospital director, Dr. Smith. Under Dr. Maxwell's protection, all I had to think about was maximizing my skills. After his retirement, the position of head of neurology was to be filled by an external hire, and it remained vacant for a while. Already holding the title of associate professor, I was temporarily assigned as the acting head, representing the department and coordinating with other medical divisions. There were many in the hospital who did not take kindly to my presence. Without Dr. Maxwell's backing, I found myself at the forefront of troublesome office politics. The especially problematic person was Dr. Vincent, the deputy director and head of surgery, who was notoriously harsh and often clashed with me. Despite this, since Dr. Vincent also primarily handled VIP cases, we had to cooperate frequently. At that time, Dr. Vincent was the primary physician for a famous singer, whose hospitalization itself was newsworthy. One day, I participated in a pre-surgical conference for this patient. The surgery would be performed by Dr. Vincent, of course, but there was a disagreement between my diagnosis and his. Despite repeatedly presenting the imaging and explaining, my views were dismissed, and none of the other doctors dared to contradict Dr. Vincent. Eventually, Dr. Vincent decided my diagnosis was wrong and proceeded with a different treatment. The patient did not survive. It was clear that the cause was Dr. Vincent's misdiagnosis and surgical error. However, he shifted all the blame onto me. I was blamed for the patient's death due to my supposed misdiagnosis. In this hospital, going against Dr. Vincent meant not being able to survive. Although a few nurses and pharmacists spoke out in my defense, they were dismissed as a warning to others. No doctor was willing to speak the truth, and I was left to take the fall alone, resulting in my departure from the hospital. My medical error, sensationalized by the media, effectively ended my future as a doctor. Disgusted with the world of medicine and losing my passion for saving lives, I decided to return to my rural hometown to take over the family inn. It's about a 2-hour flight to my hometown. Normally, I would have flown first class, but this time I bought an economy class ticket and waited for boarding, and then in the lounge, which was noisy due to first-class passengers. A younger men were loudly celebrating with a few older men. Other passengers frowned at their unrefined behavior, but they continued their loud conversations, which were clearly audible. Derek is the main guest at tomorrow's conference. It's unprecedented for someone his age to be a professor. From such conversations, it was evident. Some doctors and their entourage were heading to a conference. The doctor, clearly younger than the others, was being flattered and acting superior. Well, it's a world I no longer belong to. Once on the plane, I started to read a book. After takeoff, it wasn't long before there was a commotion up front. Apparently, there was a medical emergency in first class. Sure enough, the doctors from the lounge were also on the same flight. There was no role for me to play. I realize that I'm thinking about this. I've quit being a doctor, I'm just an ordinary person now. Just when I thought it had quieted down, a flight attendant rushed in from first class in a fluster. "Is there a doctor on board?" It was a phrase I often heard during my active days. There were doctors headed to a conference in first class. From the content of their pompous conversation, I guessed they were from a major hospital. Had they not attended to the patient? Excuse me, aren't there some doctors from a hospital in first class? When I raised my hand and called out to the frantic flight attendant, she looked at me as if grasping at straws. "Are you a doctor? Could you please help us?" My gesture caused a misunderstanding, but I was curious why those doctors hadn't responded, so I followed the attendant without clearing up the confusion. Upon reaching first class, it was chaotic. A group of doctors from the lounge before boarding were surrounding an elderly couple, attempting to administer treatment. "What should we do, Derek? It's not subsiding," said a man anxiously observing the patient, addressing the youngest and most authoritative among them. The elderly man was having a seizure and had lost consciousness. "Ma'am, is this the first time your husband has had an epileptic seizure?" Derek, the man addressed as such, spoke to the woman who was pale and holding her husband's hand. "Epilepsy? This is the first I've heard of it. Is my husband having an epileptic seizure?" These symptoms are definite. While individual reactions may vary, they should stabilize soon. It's important to keep him lying on his side to monitor his condition. Your husband is lucky to have me treating him. His entourage nodded in agreement. After all, Derek is the next chairman of the American Neurosurgical Society. He's an authority in this field. Being on this plane was a stroke of luck. They praised Derek in chorus. As I was led through this exchange by the flight attendant, I found myself standing before the patient. Despite having quit medicine, the patient's symptoms and possible diagnosis instantly came to mind. "Ma'am, was your husband taking any medication for high blood pressure?" "Yes, my husband has high blood pressure and regularly receives medication for it," the wife responded to my inquiry. Hearing this, I directed Derek and his group. "This is a case of hyponatremia. Derek, administer saline immediately." Since I had quit medicine, I no longer carried emergency medical supplies as I used to. "What? Who do you think you are giving orders to? Derek isn't someone that a doctor who can only afford economy class should be talking to." His group confronted me aggressively. Anyone, please prepare an IV quickly. Severe hyponatremia can closely mimic epileptic seizures. It's common knowledge in neurology. Derek's entourage started murmuring among themselves. "Is Derek's diagnosis incorrect? That can't be." They exchanged confused glances. Meanwhile, the man's seizures started again. If a respected doctor lets a patient die on a plane, he might as well be erased from the medical society, I said firmly. One of the entourage finally called a nurse from economy class, and they began administering an IV to the patient. "You guys, do whatever you want." Everyone fell silent, watching Derek's reactions. After the plane landed, I was urged to accompany the patient to the ambulance waiting on the tarmac. I hesitated honestly. It's such a rural place. Nobody here knows me. I reassured myself and was about to board the ambulance when Derek yelled, "Know your place, bumpkin, you've embarrassed me." At the hospital, I explained the situation to the doctor and reported the treatment and medication administered. Thanks to the appropriate measures, the patient will be able to go home soon. By the way, Dr. Fumpson, which hospital do you work at? The doctor praised my intervention and asked. No, I used to run a clinic, but I closed it down and am on my way back to my hometown. I brushed it off with a casual lie. The doctor accepted it easily, saying, "It's a shame for someone as skilled as you." After ensuring the man was stable, I silently left the hospital. I felt like I recognized the patient's face somehow, but I quickly forgot about it as I hurried back to my family home. When I arrived, my parents and my brother and his wife, who help run the family inn, all welcomed me. Despite what had been said on TV, no one mentioned it. They simply accepted me back. It's getting tougher to manage as we get older, so it's really helpful that you're here to assist, Eugene, my parents remarked. I'll train you thoroughly. True to their word, I started helping out with the inn the very next day. Though the work was entirely different from what I had done as a doctor, it was refreshingly challenging. Eugene, you can't be so condescending. This is hospitality. My brother unexpectedly advised me. I didn't intend to be, but perhaps that's how I appeared. And the work at the inn starts early. Preparing breakfast, seeing off guests, cleaning rooms, welcoming new guests, and preparing dinner. The list of tasks was endless. Harder than being a doctor, huh? My father commented, to which I could only nod. By the end of each day, I was exhausted and fell asleep the moment I hit the bed, which spared me the time to dwell on my hospital days. My days passed in a blur. Just when I was getting used to the routine and starting to find my rhythm, a woman came to stay at the inn. What's the name on the reservation? The female guest was strikingly beautiful, almost otherworldly. I thought I had seen her face before, perhaps she was an actress or model. While I processed her check-in, she introduced herself. My name is Sophia. I didn't recognize the name, unfortunately. I'll take your luggage for you, I offered as I smoothly completed the check-in and led her to her room. Dinner is served in the dining hall from 5 to 9 p.m., and then, as I was about to leave the room after explaining everything, she stopped me. Don't you remember me? I paused and turned to look at her. Where had we met? Such a beautiful face should be unforgettable. You were on that plane, the one you helped the man. Ah. I instinctively pointed at her with a smile. You were the flight attendant on that plane. I quickly withdrew my finger, embarrassed. I apologize for the bluntness. I was just so surprised. She didn't seem offended, continuing with a smile. Actually, the man you helped was my grandfather. I was surprised again, but tried to remain composed as I chose my words carefully. Is that so? How is he doing now? Thanks to you, he's as lively as ever. It turns out it was hyponatremia caused by his blood pressure medication. Just as you diagnosed, he had gotten a stronger prescription because he was flying. Sophia spoke brightly, her expression changing rapidly, showing a different side from when she was a flight attendant. She had often stayed with her grandparents as a child because her parents were busy, and she grew quite attached to them. Her grandfather was especially fond of her, and she herself was a grandfatherly child. The doctors in first class at that time seemed too embarrassed in front of their subordinates to back down. It's a real problem if they misdiagnose like that, especially when it could be life-threatening. It was really fortunate that a doctor like you happened to be on the same flight, she said. Being stared at so directly and thanked made me feel ticklish inside. It was just by chance. Plus, I've already quit being a doctor. Now I'm helping out at this inn. Upon hearing that I had quit being a doctor, Sophia looked a bit disappointed, but she didn't ask anything more about it. So, you've changed careers. Even though this job looks tough, you seem to enjoy it, she said. Her comment surprised me. Indeed, getting thanked by guests here felt different from when I was a doctor, and I genuinely appreciated it. Maybe this job suits me better. Yes, I enjoy this job. It offers a different kind of fulfillment from being a doctor. I answered sincerely. Sophia, who was here on her precious vacation amidst a busy work schedule, was staying for 3 nights and 4 days. Although there aren't many tourist spots around here to visit for 3 nights, Sophia seemed to enjoy the places I suggested on the first and second days. When she returned, she excitedly reported where she went and what happened. "You must have seen many places abroad," I said. She shook her head. "There's still a lot to see domestically. Plus, traveling for leisure feels completely different from traveling for work," she explained. I listened to her, pondering her perspective. On the last day of her stay, a local festival took place. I hadn't known about it, but it seems it's an annual event that both locals and tourists look forward to. "Oh, haven't you been to the festival yet? You can go after you finish preparing dinner. That beautiful guest, she's your acquaintance, right? Why don't you invite her?" my mother suggested with a meaningful smile. "She and I aren't like that," I protested. "Well, surely a beauty like her is out of your league," she teased. I couldn't deny that. Eventually, after dinner that day, I decided to approach Sophia as she was heading from the dining hall to her room. "There's a festival nearby today. It's an annual event. I haven't been myself, so if you'd like, we could take a stroll there," I suggested, though it sounded like an excuse even to me. However, Sophia happily accepted the invitation. We agreed to meet at the entrance after dinner. "I love the atmosphere of festivals. I used to go a lot with my grandfather when I was a kid," she shared, clearly looking forward to it. Unexpectedly excited, we walked side by side. Her beauty attracted attention. Men and women alike turned to look at her, but she didn't seem to care and walked on swiftly. Watching her excitedly interact with the ordinary stalls at the festival, I started to have fun too. Various events were taking place at the central square, and she seemed to enjoy them thoroughly. "Thank you for today. I had a lot of fun," she said on our way back, looking content. "It's a nice place, isn't it? I can see why you'd want to come back," I replied, feeling a bit guilty under a straightforward gaze. I was blamed for a medical mistake and had to quit being a doctor. Actually, I wanted to continue practicing medicine, but the incident blew up so much that there's nowhere in this field that would hire me now. "Of course, I find this work at the inn fulfilling too," I confided. Sophia listened intently. "So, if there was a chance, you'd want to work as a doctor again?" Surprisingly honest, I found myself replying, "Yes, if there was a place that would accept me." "I see. I think you helping patients as a doctor and working hard to create good memories for guests here at the inn, both are wonderful." She smiled satisfactorily. "Thank you," I managed to say, overwhelmed by the compliment. Feeling like I had no value beyond being a doctor, her words made me start to seriously consider taking over the inn. The next morning, Sophia left. "Can I come again?" she asked before leaving, which somehow made me lose my enthusiasm a bit. Yet, I decided to dedicate myself even more to managing the inn, hoping to earn further recognition from her on her next visit. "Eugene, a courier has delivered something for you," my brother announced. One day, my brother mentioned to me, and I picked up an envelope. Upon opening it, I found an invitation to a party hosted by Anderson Medical Equipment, the largest medical device manufacturer in the country. Thinking it was a mistake, I set it aside and completely forgot about the invitation afterward. One day, my father called out, "Eugene, you have a visitor." I had no idea who it could be, but I went to the entrance where a man in a suit, a stranger, was standing. "Mr. Fumpson, I've come to pick you up." "Yes." I didn't recognize him. and his talk of picking me up seemed suspicious. Sensing my confusion, the man explained the situation. "I am here on behalf of my boss. I believe an invitation to tomorrow's party was sent to you." I tried to make sense of the situation in my head. "Does that mean you've come to take me to tomorrow's party?" I asked. "Yes, we will take a taxi to the airport shortly. I have arranged a ticket for the 6 p.m. flight. Upon arrival, we will go directly to the hotel, where the party venue is also located. You need not prepare anything, just come as you are." Despite his calm explanation, I couldn't keep up. Why would they go to such lengths to have me at this party? "Are you sure I'm the one who's been invited?" I asked hesitantly. "Yes, there is no mistake," the man asserted firmly. Unable to decline under such circumstances, I reluctantly agreed to go with him. We took a taxi to the airport. And ironically, I was on a first-class flight. Being a reception hosted by a pharmaceutical company, it was undoubtedly filled with medical professionals. I didn't understand why I was invited, but I feared that revisiting my past after starting anew might lead to unpleasant experiences. I was already regretting following this mysterious man. After landing, we switched to another taxi and headed to a well-known upscale hotel. In the hotel lobby, the man who brought me said, "I will come to pick you up again tomorrow," and then he left. I was escorted to a suite for some reason. A high-brand suit for tomorrow's party was prepared in the room. No escape now. Dinner had apparently been ordered in advance and was delivered to my room. I decided to make the best of the situation and enjoy the suite. The next day, after getting ready, the same man came to pick me up. We took the elevator down to what seemed to be the largest room in the hotel. Food was arranged buffet style, and as I stood there blankly, a waiter handed me a glass of champagne. I wondered how many people were gathered here. Probably around 100. The crowd was all medical professionals, a familiar array of faces. Some recognized me and began whispering as they looked my way. Pretending not to notice the discomfort, I went to get some food. Then, I heard a familiar voice call out, "Eugene." Looking in the direction of the voice, Sophia was waving at me. Sophia. Dressed in a gown, Sophia was stunning, standing out even in a crowd. She had looked good in her flight attendant uniform and casual clothes during her travels, but today, she was as beautiful as any actress. I couldn't help but stare. "I'm glad you came. Can I get you a drink?" she asked, easing my nerves with her friendly demeanor. "Thank you," I responded honestly. "To reunion." She raised her glass, said that, and took a sip of her champagne. Delicious." Pleased, I asked her, "By the way, Sophia, why are you at this party?" After taking a sip of my champagne, I couldn't help but inquire. "A relative of mine is involved with the organizers. I heard that you would be here too, so I took some time off work," she said with a mischievous smile. As we chatted, the party officially began. The first to speak on stage as the chairman of Anderson Medical Equipment was the man who had fainted on the plane that time. "He's your grandfather, right?" "The company was founded by my grandfather. The current CEO is my father," she replied, still with that playful smile. Then I turned my attention to Chairman Anderson on the stage. "As you know, we pride ourselves on being the top pharmaceutical manufacturer in the country. In pursuit of further development and for the advancement of the medical field, we have been planning a new project. We have built a hospital where we can directly use and manage our pharmaceuticals in clinical settings to see their effects on patients firsthand. It makes sense for the manufacturer, it saves on marketing to doctors, and hospitals get priority access to hard-to-obtain drugs. Plus, they can observe patient outcomes directly." Impressed, I listened until suddenly, "Eugene," my name was called out, the lights dimmed, and a spotlight shone on me. All the guests turned to look in my direction. Blinded by the light, I covered my eyes with my hand, but the announcement came regardless. We have decided to appoint Eugene Thompson as the director of our new hospital. Confused, I stood there as a voice rang out from the crowd. That man committed a medical error 2 years ago and was virtually expelled. Can we really trust such a person with a hospital directorship? Without trust in the director, the hospital's management is doomed to fail. The room stirred. The voice belonged to none other than Dr. Vincent, the very person who had pinned the medical mistake on me. With a young doctor, Derek, who had misdiagnosed hyponatremia as epilepsy, by his side. That's right. Appointing a doctor who made such a grave medical error as director will tarnish the hospital's reputation before it even opens. Derek chimed in, supporting Dr. Vincent. Sophia had told me that Dr. Vincent and Derek were uncle and nephew. But regarding that matter, the chairman began to speak, and the room quieted down again. When the incident made the news 2 years ago, our company's product was mentioned. I personally investigated the incident because our product was involved. And what did we find? Misdiagnosis suspicions came to light. So, that means Eugene is responsible. In front of the majority, I was again being announced as the perpetrator of the medical accident. Suddenly, on us a familiar voice shouted, "No, it's not true. It was the deputy director's misdiagnosis." None of the team involved at the time testified the truth because they were afraid to contradict Dr. Vincent and risk their positions. From there, I officially became the director of the new hospital. Later, the incident 2 years ago was acknowledged not as a medical accident, but as a misdiagnosis by Dr. Vincent. Thanks to a nurse speaking the truth at that party, my innocence was proven. Thus, I became the first director of the hospital, which quickly garnered attention in the medical community. Sophia's grandfather, Mr. Anderson, even asked if I would consider marrying his granddaughter, and I happily accepted the proposal. Sophia resigned from the airline to marry me, and she has been by my side ever since. The hospital's management is going smoothly, and we have been blessed with 2 children. Sophia, now approaching her senior years, is still beautiful and hides nothing. As a couple, we are somewhat famous within the hospital. There's just one secret plan I have kept from Sophia. I'm planning to retire from hospital management next year and return to my hometown with Sophia to take over the family inn. I can already picture the beautiful innkeeper by my side, smiling,